to Wargaming World. I had put a video out over Christmas just to introduce the fact that Wargaming World Solo, the new rule set, will be coming out in 2024. So I've put together a how to play video alongside with that. Now, I know it can be frustrating because the rule set isn't out yet, but I thought it might be interesting to see about what the game actually looks like. So I've put a very simple World War I game together. I've had loads of people who've dropped me a line to say, when's that out? Can I pay for it in advance? So all I'd say is that if you want to drop me a line, you'll see here on the line it says editor@wargamingworld.net. Drop me a line and I can keep you updated on where things are. I do have a website with it included as well, so that detail's in front of you now, and I'll keep you informed about how things are progressing. But thanks very much for everybody's enthusiasm. So there's lots of solo players out there, so I really like it. Now this game, as you'll see, is between a Belgian defensive force and a German attacking force in August 1914. The Belgian force and the Germans, the game is effectively between yourself as a solo player and the virtual you. So the virtual you is the term that I refer to in terms of my opponent. And actually, as you go in the game, you get much keener in making sure that the virtual you works. So beyond anything else, I'll say thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the game. Any inquiries, things you want to ask, feel free to drop me a line through Wargaming World Solo, the Facebook group, or naturally on the YouTube that you're going to see, or as I say, via the website editor@wargamingworld.net. Thanks very much.
Now, I've put together a copy of the rule sets, just draft at the moment. And what I want to do is I'm trying to draw up some interest and see who would like to get further information, so no bones about that. But what I'll try and do is to go through the game using the various chapters so it's clear. Naturally, it's not very easy for you without the rule set in front of you to understand how this game unfolds. So I appreciate that, and hopefully I'll try and be clear. The first thing I want to do is just highlight one key thing about the principles of the game themselves. All right, so these are what I've described as the golden rules. So there are 5 of them, and the first is that the rules are for solo play only. It really is a solo player. The idea here is to make sure that actually you get the game the way you want to play it. Second is that the whole point is that it's got to be an equal balance between the solo player and what I'm going to refer to as the virtual you, the VY. So it's equally likely that either side is going to win. The third is that the tabletop can be any size and scale. So conscious that sometimes people use the tabletop for all sorts of different things, for work or for obviously family life, etc. So I'm not trying to create something which is huge, and that's why it can be a relatively simple game if you wish. Also, I appreciate that people spend a whole lot of time painting their figures, so I use whole units. I don't remove them until that unit is withdrawn, and that's why I keep it on the tabletop. And so the fifth element to this is that every turn should produce an unpredictable output. So whilst these rules are relatively simple, I add things into it like random events and tests if the units, the VY units in particular, can operate, and if they change what I call their approach. Now their approach is going to be either cautious, it's going to be measured, or it's going to be bold. And there are various different activities that they do as a consequence of the circumstances they are in with those particular approaches. But that's the key principles of the game. Hope that's clear. So let's see if we can make preparation for this particular action, 1914 August, between Belgian and German forces. So if you look, you can see right in front of you now, the main focal point for this game is this main road. So it's a key critical road. It's being defended by the Belgians furthest away from us. It's left open because it's going to be used for Belgian movement as well as German, but at the moment we've had some bombardments here on the left hand side, and the game itself is really about trying to take this road and to push the German forces through. So our focal point here is the centre and the road moving through the town. Okay, so it's an attack versus defence game. So we've got 10 units for the Germans, the attacking German units, and then we also have 8 for the defending Belgians. We've got Carabinier here at the front 2 units. Just take a note that there are leaders just on the side, slightly separately. These 2 units are grenadiers, standard line infantry at the back, and 2 machine gun units. Now, the Germans, I've got 6 infantry regiments, got 2 Jaegers, and at the back I'm going to use all the cavalry there as one single unit. And then at the front we've got machine guns, which that's going to be a single unit also. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through how the units differ. I'm just looking at the German force here, for example, and we're looking at troops up at the top there. So troops are either going to be inexperienced, regular or veteran, so we'll roll for that, and it'll give a score of between 7 and 9. The leaders, so that's the individual leaders for each unit, again, inexperienced, regular or veteran, and they'll give a -1 to a +1. So in total, a unit can vary with the morale standard, that's the MS, between 6 and 10. Then in terms of impact, now the impact is effectively whether they are light, standard or heavy. So I then change it with the value next to it. So some people like doing things by points, a point system. So the way I look at it is to say if you're a light force, it's 1.25, and we then times it by the morale standard for the total. Regulars are, so that's a standard unit, that's 1.5, and then heavy is 1.75. The significance of the difference between light and heavy is that light will give you a -1 in terms of the impact for shooting and for melee when appropriate, depending on what weapons you have. And heavy, not surprisingly, is a +1 for shooting and for melee if that is appropriate. Alright, so I've calculated both the forces, the Belgian and the Germans. We'll just take a quick look at the Belgians. So you'll see that in terms of troop type, they've been pretty good. In terms of regular or experienced, there's only one point where the leadership drags that down a little, but in terms of the morale standard, it's pretty high. They're all standard units with the exception of the machine guns, which are going to be what we'll regard as heavy. Germans, on the other hand, aren't quite as good. So although the troops themselves are fairly regular, it's the leaders themselves that are inexperienced, and that's dragged down the morale standard 1 all the way down to 6. And in terms of the impact, again, it's going to be standard other than the cavalry and machine guns, which we're going to be considering as heavy. Now you'll see during the game how the morale standard is important, because that's going to test the virtual you in particular about how we see whether they'll do what they're supposed to in terms of plans. Finally, on the side you'll also see where it says character. So I've drawn a card for each of the units. Now it varies in how those different characteristics can be deployed, but it's only once in a whole game. So as the game goes, you'll see where they're going to be used. Now, at the moment, we don't know which side I'm going to be, whether it's the Belgians or the Germans. What we do know is that it's an attack and defence game. So, we have to write battle plans, brief as they might be. They're very useful as we go in the game. And so when it's an attack and defence game, we write for the attackers 2 bold plans and 1 measured. And for the defence, we have 2 cautious approaches, and we have 1 measured 2. So you'll see this is the game as I've highlighted it through just making a quick photograph, and I've then written 6 plans, so it's not particularly onerous, but it's just to give an idea about the different plans I'm going to undertake. But before I do anything else, I'm going to have to roll and work out whether I'm going to be fighting as the attacking German force or the defending Belgian force. Okay, I'm going to roll rather than pick. 1, 2, 3, I'll say I'll be the German force. 3 it is, so I'll be the Germans. Now the way the game works is that I will set the Germans up along this line within 6 inches of the board edge. I know what my objective is. Obviously I want to take the road at the other end. And I can just pick one of the 3 plans that I made. I could roll for it. And so, okay, I've got 3 of them, so I'll say 1, 2 is the first plan. Okay, so my plan is to attack, bold attack, advance on both flanks with cavalry and Jaeger units on either side to draw Belgian units from the centre, with 5 remaining units advancing directly on the road to the objective, using the machine gun as support to engage any strong points. Okay, that's fine. I've got the 3 plans for the Belgians, but I don't need to draw that first. I'll set up the Germans and we'll go from there. So you can now see, going from right to left, that I've set up the German right flank with the cavalry and the Jaegers, and then in the centre I've got 5 units supported by the machine gun. Moving over to the left hand side, I've got the same. I've got the Jaegers and the cavalry. Now I did mention right at the start that I was going to have all the cavalry together, so what I've done is I've removed one of the infantry units, so it means that the Germans have 10 in total. So the Germans are ready to attack, but whereabouts are the Belgians? Just going to roll for the Belgian plan. So it's first the plan that I've written. Okay, so the Belgian plan is to keep 4 in reserve and to keep the machine gun and the infantry, so the carabiniers, to be concentrated more or less around the centre where possible. Now, when you start the game, one of the first things you would want to know is, well, where do I actually put the virtual U? Where do the enemy forces go? Now, naturally, you can't place them where you want, and so instead what we do is to start by putting markers. So it's a marker phase, and what that means is that we'll put 3 markers. Now, the Belgians in this case are the defenders, so we'll have 2 cautious markers and 1 measured marker. We place that across the board. Now, again, it relates to the battle plan. So in this instance it's going to be towards the centre of the road. But my table, for example, is 8 foot by 3, so it might be that when we place it differently, so maybe for a reconnaissance or an attacking force, they're quite a considerable distance. And importantly is that only one of them is going to turn out to be the actual enemy as a whole. So the idea is that when I start this off, is that it's to in some ways wrong foot at me as the player, so that I can't know right from the start where my enemy is going to be. And the 2 on the left hand side are going to be the cautious markers, and on the right hand side is going to be measured. Okay, so I put the units around the focal point. So the focal point obviously here is the road, this area, so I've got a cautious marker on the left hand side, a measured marker in the centre, and then on the right hand side I've got another cautious marker. And now roll 2d6 for the cautious markers and 3d6 for the measured, moving directly forwards. Final outcome of that is I've got 3 inches for the unit that's in within that building, 8 inches with the measured unit, and 5 further on the other side. The only one condition is that the 2 cautious units cannot be further forward than the measured one. So the measured one would seem right in the open, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is where the Belgian forces are. However, at the end of that, we've got the markers in place, we've got the Germans in place, and we're ready to start the game. Okay, so start the game. It's unit activation first of all of the solo player, and the first turn, the important thing here is that what you should be able to do is to activate all of the original units. So I've got 10 units to use with the German force. Now, you roll 1d6, but also there are some additions. I'll also get, because the virtual U is still just markers rather than figures, I get a +2. The enemy's not fired, I get another 2, and then I'll use one of the commands. So my command unit can sort of share their ability to have a unit activate. And in addition to that, also because I'm on the attack, I'll also get a free command as well. So that effectively means it's a +6 to whatever I roll. So 4 and above, it means every unit can be activated. I'm going to try and use the black dice always for the Germans and blue for the Belgians, and we've got a 6 anyway, so all units can move. Now before we do anything, there is also there are 2 other factors, or 2 other things that we do first of all. The first of which is a random event. For a random event we need a 6, so let's see if we get one. It's a 5, so nothing happens. And the third activity would be flank or reserves, so we'd have flank movements from the solo player if that was required, but we don't because we've got all the units on the table. So now I'll move forward. Okay, so I've advanced the Germans forward. I do realise there is a disadvantage of having every single figure individually based rather than on groups, but never mind. So move forward on the central road here, and on the right and left hand side I've got the cavalry moving a little bit further forward, and 2 things take place here. The first is that by moving down this road, the first marker, which is the measured marker, is certainly in line of sight, so we're going to have to test and see whether the Belgians are in that position, or alternatively over on the right hand side here then we've got the second unit, which is more cautious, potentially in view. Now I'm going to roll for those. If neither of them are there, we'll therefore know that the Belgian forces are going to be over here on the left hand side towards that building or buildings, and therefore the deployment will go from there. So dead simple about working out how we do this. I'm going to roll a d6, and if it's 1 or 2, we know that it's this unit right in front of us. Okay, is it directly in front? No, it isn't. So I've removed the marker from there, and we know that they're not directly in front potentially, but look on this side where the cavalry and infantry are approaching, and therefore the Belgians will be in the line of sight. Let's have a test whether they are over on this side. Actually, this time it's 1 to 3, and it is. So I'm going to remove the marker in this area. What I would normally use is to go through to chapter 12, looking at the deployment of virtual units, and the specific table I would be looking at here is this one. So, however, I'm going to supersede that a little bit because I prefer the look of the actual battle plan itself. So the idea was to defend, be cautious. We've got 4 units off to a reserve, and so to keep it flexible and accurate, I think, to the game, I'm going to stick to that. So I'll show you how we have deployed. This is what we've got. The Belgians have set up. We've got 2 machine gun teams and 2 rifle teams, and they've set up in the phase of the solo player. So it's the solo player who's detected the units and then they've appeared. So they will be able to operate in their own turn, and then you'll see how we operate differently for the virtual U. So it actually comes to the end of the phase for the solo player. I've moved all 10 units further forward. Move the cavalry forward on the right hand side and again on the left hand side here, and so it's over to the phase of the virtual U. Now, just like the first phase for the solo player, it's about unit activation. However, what I can't do is to roll to see how many units will operate and then choose, naturally, because I'm the solo player. So instead we've got to see whether the 4 units will actually follow the behaviour that we want them to undertake. So how do we do that? Now, all 4 of them are in their approach is cautious, and if you remember, what we have is we've got our morale standard for each of the units. So the Carabinier unit, there are 2 of them, One has a morale standard of 9, one of 8. And the same with the 2 machine gun units. So what we're going to do is that we have to roll 2d6 and to see whether they will be equal or lower. And if so, they will follow the cautious approach, and we can move on to their action. This infantry unit, 8s, and they're fine. And they're fine too. Machine gun on an 8. That is an 8 with a 9 for the second machine gun. That's fine as well. So all 4 units will follow the path that I'll show you in a second. Before we can do anything else, the next phase is to look at a potential random event. Remember, it's a roll of a 6. It's not, so there's no random event. Phase is for reserves or flank units. Now, I would try and bring on the reserve for this, but I'm going to say it's the first turn, so I don't think reserves will appear on the first turn. What they wanted to do was to understand through the battle plan where the German advance is, and I think it's a little too early, so I'm going to skip the reserve coming on and go straight to movement if they wanted to do that, or action. Okay, so this time I'm going to move into the virtual U engine. This effectively is to see what decisions we make and what actions take place. I'm going to flip straight to the table here in terms of what a cautious unit will do, and based on where they are at the moment is that what I need to do is to draw a card. I've got 2 sets of cards at the top there, Belgians at the top, Germans below them. I draw a card, and if it's effectively anything other than a joker, then they're going to fire at any range to the attacking Germans who are in the open. So I've got 4 units, I'm going to draw 4 cards. So anything but a joker, effectively. So first machine gun unit is a queen, that's fine. The second machine gun, 3, that's fine. Then we've got the first infantry unit, a joker, but that's to one side. And second infantry unit, it's a joker. It's not a joker, it's a jack. So the first infantry unit will take cover. That means this unit will not fire. So I've got 3 units that are going to fire, so let's check the ranges. Naturally, these are very, very broad categories, but we're going to say that rifles is going to be 24 inches in terms of close range. And then you've got an extreme range, and we'll see how that affects things shortly. That's 32 inches for the rifles, 36 for machine guns. So all units are going to be at close range. It would be half effect if they were at extreme range. The only factor here is that we've got to get below the morale standard, and we get a -1 to help that when units are in the open and in close range. So for the first machine gun, we're going to fire at this unit. Its morale standard is 8, so it's 9 or below. And that's hit. Unit is the second target. This time it is with the rifle unit, but a high score, but that's 11, so that's going to be a miss. Finally, this one with the second machine gun, and that's also a hit. Impact is 1d6. That's a 6. And that's also a 6. With both units now hit, the next thing to do is that we need to work out the deduction of the impact against the morale standard of the units and then roll against it. If you remember, so we've got the first Jaeger unit. It's got a poor leader, so its morale standard is 7. We've taken 6 for casualties, so that's 1. So we'll roll a 2d6 and see how high above 1 we get to. So it's a 9, so we're 8 above the morale standard. Now with an 8, that unit will break. That means to flee 2 times your movement distance, which would be off the board. However, I'm going to try one thing, which is to have a look at the if there's a character element for this unit to see if it might save it. I've rolled a 5 for the unit for its character. I'm just having a look on the quick reference sheet, and on a 5 is a friend in high places, 1 free action of any type. So I'm going to use that card now. I'm going to say that it's a leader that allows you potentially to do another morale test, another action. If we fail from this, they're off the board. So what do we get? 9. So that's still 8 higher. 8 higher is to break, and this unit definitely is now off the board. This unit's the 55th, and their morale standard is 8. So 2. What do we get here? That's 10. So again, that's going to be another 8. And that unit is also going to break and will be off the board. I'm having a look at the characteristic, and it's 9, just helps them in attack. Well, that's the end of the phase for the virtual U, and that's had a devastating impact in its first firing. And the reality is that 3 of the 4 units were able to fire, passing a test with a reasonable morale standard. They hit their target and had maximum effect, and then when we rolled for the morale test, the Germans, that is, rolled very poorly, or as myself as the solo player. So although it's right at the start of the game, we've lost 2 of the 10 units. If we lose more than 50%, effectively 6 units, then the game is done. So it's certainly a big impact in the first turn. Let's see what happens in the second.
Now, what I should have also mentioned when I was firing with the machine guns is that because they're a heavy weapon, it would have been a +1 on the impact onto the German units. It didn't make any difference because the units would have been a 9 rather than an 8, and they would have broken, but just need to mention that.
So to start off the phase, it's unit activation. The Belgians are out in terms of figures, so I'll get a +1 in terms of command and +1 for an attack, and then I roll a d6 to see how many units can be activated. Plus this number, 6, that's 8. Oh, well, that's useful. So I can use every unit, so I'm going to have some firing and some movement, but before that I need to see about any random events. It's a 6 that's needed, and it is a 6. I need to turn to a card and see what that tells me. That's a 7. Okay, so the random event table, I got a 7, and so that's helpful. So this is a local commander produced a drink, and I get a +1 with morale on the next test. So the third phase would be reserves and flank movement, but there isn't for my forces. So I'm going to do some movement followed by firing. From left to right, movement is that my cavalry on the left and the Jaegers have moved up. There's no contest over here, so I've got all the way up to the entrenchment. In the centre, I've moved 2 units advancing. One on the left hand side going towards those buildings, and on the right hand side I'm moving this over towards the flank, where the cavalry have also now moved up into position. So although I've taken quite a lot of casualties to start off with, moving in the right direction, I think. Now that leaves me with my 3 remaining units, and it's 2 rifles and 1 machine gun unit, and it's going to fire at the same target. It's going to fire at the machine gun that's at the end of that road. I could take it in turns to try and hit and then try and remove that unit. Now if so, I could then fire at a different target, but I'm going to take an alternative, which is all 3 units to fire at it, and it means that the impact will be combined, and then the morale test that they take will be just a single test rather than an individual test, if that makes some sense. So let's see first of all whether the Germans can hit. Now I've realised that actually the units that are firing, it's the 80th, the 145th, as well as the machine gun. The machine gun and the 145 are on 8s for their morale standard. The 80th, however, is on a 6. It's made more difficult where the machine gun team are in hard cover, and so therefore, in terms of to hit, it's going to be 6s for the units that were on 8, and it's 4 for the 80s. Start the one needing a 4. That's a miss. Rifle team. That's a miss. That's also a miss. I should have realised that and advanced the unit that we're going to be needing 4s to hit, but all 3 have missed, so that's the end of the turn as far as the Germans are concerned. So it's over to the Belgians and the virtual U. So the first thing is to see whether the 4 units will activate and continue to do so in a cautious way. So infantry unit on a 9. No, it won't, so I'll show what happens in a second. Infantry unit on 8. Oh, that's okay. On a 9, that's fine.
Second machine gun on an 8 is fine also. So what happens to this unit, who've then failed, is that their behaviour now moves, temporarily at least, to either bold or to measured. So I'll roll for that. 3 is bold. Now it's measured. So what does that really mean? It means that in the next turn we will test again to see whether this unit actually passes its morale. Also, it's inactive for the remainder of this turn. So that leaves us just with these 3 units to operate. But before we do anything else, it's a potential random event. No, nothing happened. Now, we've had no random event, but we may have reserves coming in. So let's have a look and see how that takes place. So this is the process. I take a card first of all. If it's a number card, then nothing happens. Picture card, and then we'll see how the reinforcements appear. We just want to make sure that it's not a joker. Okay. So let's have a look, see what we get. It's a 9, so nothing happens in this turn. If there's no reserves, then it's just actions, and it'll be the same as it was. So it's going to be firing with the 3 units in front. So I'm going to pick 3 different targets. So the machine gun is going to fire at this unit moving forward. Rifles will fire at this unit on the road, and the other machine gun will fire at this unit moving forward. Machine gun is an 8. That's a hit. An 8, and that's a hit also. Machine gun. That is another hit. So the impact on this unit, it's a machine gun, so we add 1 to this dice. So 4 in total. Rifle shot that's hit here, so it's a standard roll, but it's still 4. Unit plus 1, and that's 5 in total. This is the 75th. 75th, I've got a morale standard of 7. Taken 4 in terms of their casualties, and that still factors in the machine gun. So they'll be fine if it's 3 or less. Let's see what the outcome is. So that's 3 above their morale standard. So if you remember, we had the random event, so it's actually a 2 is the difference, not 3, but either way it's still the same. So the unit will need to reform, and then as it is a consequence of shooting, it means that the unit will move back half a move. It means that in the next phase it may not advance, but it can return fire. Now this unit is the 145th, it's a slightly better morale standard of 8. So if it's 4, then it's absolutely fine. Anything above, we'll have to work it out. So what have we got there? We've got 7, so that's 3 over. Similarly to the other unit, it means it will move back. Half is the 76th. Its morale standard is 8. 5 was the impact of the firing, so 3 or less would be fine. Let's see how far over it is. Now 9. So that's going to be 6 over. Now here the unit will need to retreat, and as far as retreating is concerned, it means it will move back a full move, and in the next phase it can't move or return fire. So that's the end of turn 2, and effectively what's happening is that the Germans in the centre here are being pinned back by fire. Managed to advance on the right hand side and on the left hand side. And as far as the Belgians are concerned, although they're holding the Germans away here in the centre, what they're not getting is reserves. So we'll see what happens when the Germans begin to advance, particularly on this side. So that's the end of this turn. Over to turn 3. Start of turn 3, and it's my turn to move, etc. So I'll get 1 for the command unit. My units are still within 6 inches of the commander, and I'll have 1 factor for movement because I'm an attacking force. Gives me a minimum of 2 plus 1d6. Okay, so what do I get? Oh, another good roll. So it's 8 in total. I know that one of the units can neither move nor fire, so it doesn't really matter, but I've got every option. So you're getting used to the sequences now. Let's see if there is a random event. Oh yes, there is. The German card, random event, is a king. Well, it's a good card to have if you're in melee, because this card is that it'll give you a +3 in attack or defence. Unfortunately, for this turn I'm not going to be in contact, but anyway, on with the next element. So the third phase would be reserves. I don't have any reserve or flank troops. That means I'm over to movement and shooting. So I've started with movement, and I've moved the cavalry. They were up to this entrenchment. They've now gone over, so I've taken the horses off, you'll see, and I've just put some figures there. I don't actually have dismounted cavalry, so but you'll see where they are. And then the Jaegers have moved up to this position, so now they're started to take their flank. And what I would want to do is to try and occupy these buildings. Means that the reserves wouldn't be able to come in that area, and then potentially hold this flank to start taking the road. Exactly the same on the right hand side. There aren't Jaegers, we obviously lost those, and so these dismounted cavalry, they've got the like shorter rifles, can hold this position. So I've done the movement, and then I've got 5 units here. The one on the far left was the one that had to move back. It retreated, so it can't fire or move in this turn. I then have the other 4 units. Now, 2 of the units, the one on the far right hand side and the one on the road, they both moved. So the one for the road fired last time, but it isn't going to have a sustained fire, which you get a +1 for, because it had to move, but it can fire, and so can the one on the right hand side. The other 2, the one, the infantry one in the centre and the machine gun, both fired last time at the machine gun of the Belgian force, and they are going to fire at the same thing again, so they will get a +1. You don't get a +1 every single turn, I'll mention, and let's see how we go, see if we can get any benefit there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fire all 4 units at that machine gun team on the extreme left. I'll start with the machine gun, which is an 8 or less. Remember, it's in hard cover, so it's a 6, but we get a +1 because we have sustained the fire, so 7 or less. And it is a 7, so that's a hit. Now this unit, the 145th, have the skill of 8, -2 is a 6 to hit. But that's a miss. Now the 80th, their skill is 6, less 2 is 4, +1 because it's sustained fire, so it's a 5. Very nearly, but not quite. Unit is a 7, less 2 is a 5. And again, that's a miss. It's 1d6 for the hit, you -2 because it is hard cover. So it's 4 away from the morale standard of the machine gun team. So the machine gun team is an 8. I've just remembered as well, it was hit by the machine gun, so it's a +1 in terms of the impact. So the impact is actually 5, so that unit goes down to 3 plus the dice roll. Right, so it's a 5, so it's a good roll effectively for it. It's a couple over, so it means that the unit will have to reform. So the unit is moved slightly back, and that is the end of the German turn. So it's the Belgian phase, and it's unit activation. So let's start with that machine gun team that has just pulled back a little. Cautious, and it will remain so. The infantry in front of it. We got there. 9, so that's above its morale standard by 1, so just need to take another roll. It's bold. No, that's temporarily measured. Put a marker there. The machine gun team. That's for the rifle team at the back. So what I'm saying here is that in the last phase it temporarily went into a measured approach. Let's roll now to see whether it goes back to its cautious way of doing things, or whether actually it's looking to do things slightly more aggressively. Yes, it is. So that means that unit now has changed in its approach, and it will now do things in a measured way. So I'll have to look onto different tables about how it operates for the remainder of, well, not just this turn, but turns moving forward. The thing that's significant about this is that it's now interrupted its firing capability. So the Belgians really would hope for a couple of things. One might be helping a random event, but 2, also the possibility of reserves coming in. There is a random event.
So is to see whether we get reserves in for the Belgians. Oh no. Right, they don't, and it's a joker, and that is pretty disastrous. Okay, so turning to it's chapter 11, and the important point is this one. When we're drawing a card for the virtual U, when it looks at reserves, if it's a joker, it's a disaster. All units designated for either reserve or flank troops are lost due to an ambush. Now, I think the consequence of not being able to get that reserve to come in is pretty scuppered the Belgians, full stop, I think, for this game. I'd left half off the table, so I didn't want to start with 8 units in place, just literally shooting at the Germans. But even so, now drawing a joker is pretty bad. So what can we do in terms of the actions themselves? So we've got 4 units. Now the machine gun team, that had to step back somewhat. So now what I'm going to say is that the machine guns are sort of fixed positions. So although you can move back and fire, I'm going to say not in the case for the heavy machine guns. So I'm going to say that the units move back to get a bit of cover, and so they can't fire in this turn, and then they'll have to move back into the original position for them to fire to get the benefit of the hard cover. Unfortunately, I can't use the rifle team here because that's changed its action from cautious to measured. So the only thing I can actually use in terms of firing is the machine gun team here. The unit at the back is the one that has now moved to a measured stage, so I'm going to show you what happens when they change in their approach. So we've actually got 2 tables. It's for a measured unit. Now if one is attacking or reconnaissance, we'd use the top table, but this one's in defence, so we're looking at the bottom table. Now the second question is to say, what is the nearest enemy to that particular unit? And in fact, it's the cavalry that's arrived on the right hand side. So we therefore look at the in cover card, element I should say, and draw a card. So what the unit would be able to do first of all is to fire if it's at close range, but, and I'll just pan back to these units, the unit that we're talking about here, although the nearest enemy is in cover, they're not actually in the arc of fire, so I don't really think that they can fire on it. However, they know that there is a problem. So I think the best thing to do is to be able to say that unit will take cover or stand to. Let's draw a card and see how we might conclude this. So it's a 3. So it's just a number, so fire in close range or take cover. Taking cover is to move immediately to available cover. It's not evasive action, and it's undertaken in good order. What I'm going to say is that the unit, in a measured way, it takes cover using the trench and essentially turns to face the unit here on the right hand side. So that's the action, that's the movement action of this unit. With the machine gun team at the nearest unit, which is this one, and it is going to be anything below a 9. So let's see if it hits, and yes it does. This one for a heavy weapon is 75th, so the morale standard is 7, so we're going to see how far above that figure we go. 7. And 7 means the unit will need to retreat, and it'll be inactive in terms of movement or firing in the next turn. Turn 4, and it's the start of unit activation with this +2 and 7. So I've been very fortunate all the way with the number of units that can be activated. As a random event, and no there's not. There's no reserves, so I'll start with some movement. So in movement, I've moved the dismounted cavalry forward. I've also moved the Jaegers over the entrenchment, now advancing over towards the road, being supported by this unit that I've moved forward. With the unit on the right hand side, I can now start to fire into, well, the more open areas of the Belgian infantry, so I'll work that out in a second. I'm going to fire, it is at close range, at the infantry. I'm going to say that it's got soft cover rather than hard cover, but they can fire from that side. Cavalry are on 8s. I know I had them as a heavy unit, but that was because they were lancers. That was the idea of using it then. So instead, it's just going to be an 8 -1 because it's a soft cover, so it's a 7 or less to hit. And it is a 7, so it is a hit. What's the damage? 5. Okay, the Carbineer are on 8. 5 for damage would make it 3. They're in soft cover, remember? So it's a 4 needed. 4, and with a 4, that's fine. Now with the machine gun, I'm going to fire at the same target. And that's a hit. So it's hard cover, so it's a -2, but this is a heavy weapon, so it's just -1. But that's effectively no effect. The same target there. We have originally an 8, -2 for hard cover. 6 to miss. This is the unit on 6 in terms of its morale standard, so it's going to be a 4 shot. And it's certainly not, so it's a miss. So we're over to the virtual U phase. We're going to start with activation. I'll start off with the machine gun on the left hand side. That is cautious. The other machine gun is cautious as well. Remember, the one which is in the trench, the raised trench, has now moved to measured. The one in front here, which we're retesting again, is measured at the moment, but it's temporary. This machine gun is fine, stays cautious. Machine gun looks like an 8, so that is fine. It's cautious also. In the trench to remain measured. It does. The unit at the front is an 8. If I roll an 8 or less, it goes back to cautious. If it is higher, it stays at measured. And it goes back to cautious. That unit that's gone back to cautious will be inactive for this turn. The first machine gun on the left hand side will move back into its original position, so it won't fire. Then we've got firing from the machine gun, and then the trench, or the unit in that trench at the top there, that will be able to fire. We need to see if there's a random event. Well, there's no. The third phase, there isn't any flank movement, so we need to look at other activation. The first movement is the machine gun back into position. It is the enemy, its nearest enemy, is in the open. Now, just as long as I don't draw the Joker card, it can't actually fire, but it's getting itself back into a position to fire, so I'll just check the card. Yep, that's fine, a 6. So the unit will move back into a position to fire in the next turn, and there we go. This unit, cautious, looking to fire. Make sure it's not a Joker. It's not, otherwise it would have taken cover. This unit, now it's moved into position, it's measured, and will fire at its nearest target in cover, if it can do. Table. So where its nearest enemy is in cover, would fire at close range. We would do, rather than take cover as a choice, as long as it is a number card. Otherwise, the unit will take cover or stand 2. What do I get here? 7. It's fine. It can also fire. Machine gun's going to fire. It's in close range. It's actually going to fire at this unit, which has 6 for its morale standard. And it's definitely a hit. Damage +1 for a heavy weapon. And that's 7. It has a poor morale. It only has 6. So we've taken 7, so we're on a -1 already. So how far above the morale standard will it be? 10, and 10 is a rout. So 80 is the unit, and like I say, its morale standard was well, effectively 10, which would be a break. However, I'm just taking to see which characteristic it's got, and it's a jack. When I take a look at a jack on here, money talks, so double action in a single turn, so I'm going to allow it to roll again to see if the unit survives this situation. Roll again. And exactly the same thing happened, so despite the fact that it had a second chance, that unit is now off the board. Okay, this game seems to twist and turn. So the unit who are in that trench, their standard morale standard is 9. The target is in soft cover, so it's an 8 or less to hit. It is a hit. I realise I should have rolled blue rather than black dice, but never mind, it's still a hit. What's the damage? 5 in soft cover, that's 4. We have a morale of 8. Now again, I'm going to utilise the characteristic, which is 7. That's reassuring. +1 for morale standard when testing after casualties. What that means is that it would be a 4 or less, but now we've used that card, it's a 5 or less. Oh, that's not great. As a 9, it's 4 over, and 4 over will mean that it needs to reform. Right, so I'm going to say that unit has withdrawn in deeper into the woods. Normally couldn't move after, but could fire, but I'm going to say can't fire next turn because it's too far into the woods there whilst it gets itself back together. It can't be shot at, but it can't shoot either. So at this point in the game, hopefully you can get a sense that actually I think either side could win this game, because it continues until you lose more than 50%. So the Germans have now lost 3 of the 10 units, so if I lost 6, then the game would be won by the Belgians. However, the German forces, certainly up on the left hand side here, are moving into position in terms of strengthening where they are and taking the objective. So the game, I think, is fairly poised, and I think it is certainly possible playing this game solo and under the Wargaming World Solo rules. Turn 5, and how many units can be activated? Well, I've got 5 plus 2, if you remember, which is 1 for an attacking unit moving, and if my commander allows to do so. And where I'm doing that, where I get that action, is here with the command with the machine gun team, so it's 7 in total. Events? No. Okay, I've moved 3 units forward on the left hand side, so I'm taking control over here. I can't do anything with the units which is over on the right hand side, so instead that just leaves me with 3 firing units. I'm going to fire at the same target. I'm going to see if I can change the look here. Again, it'll be a repeat firing for these 2 units, and try and dislodge one of the units, which is the rifle section at the centre. If not, and depending on what happens in terms of the activity of the unit there, I might call it a day with the game. I don't want it to extend beyond an hour's worth of video. Certainly gives you an idea about how the game is played, but let's see anyway. Let's see how this firing goes. Machine gun. That's a miss. A unit which has 6 down to 4 because it's in hard cover, plus 1 because it's a repeat fire, so it needs a 5. Oh, and it hits. Unit next to it firing, let's have a roll for that one. That hits 2. Now both of those hits are together, so effectively it would be a -2 for each. I'll roll them separately. I'll explain that in 2 seconds. So this -2, that's 4. Second, -2 is 3, so 7 is the total impact. I just didn't want to add the as 2d6 rolling together at -4. I thought I'd come out with a different number. Anyway, I may be overthinking it. Right, okay, so that's made 7 as an impact. Let's see what happens. It has a morale of 8. And so it's on 1, see how high above that we go. With a 4 could help in terms of the unit, but actually 4 is just a +3 inches with movement with a full belly. How far above? So, 4 in effect is where they are, so that unit will move backwards, it will reform away from that position. It'll still be in sort of soft cover, but it certainly can't fire. That's how it finishes. Over to these units to operate. Unit activation, so again I roll for each of the units, starting with the machine gun on the left hand side. That's a 9 above by 1, so 1, 2, 3, it's bold. It does go bold. The machine gun first. No, that's fine. Move backwards, let's test that. That's an 8. Fine. The other unit is a 9, and that's fine too. Output of this is that this unit, which has gone bold temporarily, that can't fire. The one moved backwards, that can't fire either. This from the back, the measured unit there, it at the moment is looking to fire in this direction. That unit can't see its target. So in theory, it could potentially move. It could move back pointing in this direction, but either way it can't fire. So what I'm going to say is that it's going to stay in this position, holding this flank, which is a danger to it. So the only unit that can operate is in actual fact this one. So let's see whether it can fire. What the output here is for a cautious unit. It's fine, it's going to be an 8. It'll be the same as last time, where it's going to fire at the German positions. I've got the unit here firing at this unit this time, but that's a miss. Okay, I'm going to stop the game there because I think it's achieved its purpose in terms of showing you how to play Wargaming World Solo, and I think it's been a pretty good game. It's the Germans haven't been able to push on in the centre, but have been able to move on the flank. We haven't had reserves for the Belgian forces, but they've more or less held their position without too much difficulty. And I could continue for what I think could be quite a long period of time to see whether we wear down the units or eventually lose a further 3 German units out of the position. So instead, I'll stop here and say I'll call it an honourable draw. I think it's been a good game, quite a lengthy game, and I've enjoyed putting this out there. So what I'd really welcome is your thoughts, your suggestions about other games, other periods, etc. I've got lots of different options to try, and other scenarios of what I might put together. But just to say thanks very much for watching, really appreciate it, and thanks for everybody who's given so much support in terms of driving this Wargaming World Solo rule set forward. Good ideas and good reviews so far, and I'll keep you very much posted about when this is, how this is advancing, either on the website or if you'd like to drop me an email, please feel free, editor@wargamingworld.net, and I'll see you next time.